right. So where would you like to start? How do you go about this, Michael?
All right. So, first of all, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. First, I'd like to just learn a little bit more about you guys. I guess to give me the quick story of how you guys got into this work. What inspired you to do it, and what it is you do exactly.
I'll let Jake go in with Farmbox first, and then
Sure.
I'll come in later.
Yeah, we have two different companies, and then a third company that is kind of above the two that we'll talk about. So Farmbox, we initially started, we were going to build shipping container houses. So we bought some land outside of Denver in an area called Erie and Broomfield. They're suburbs of Denver. And the reason why we wanted to is because the housing market is very expensive. You can't buy a house in Colorado, at least in a decent area, for under $350,000, $400,000.
Mm-hmm.
So we were going to do shipping container houses. During that process, we were designing a tube that would grow mostly leafy greens and herbs on the side of these containers.
Okay.
And International Building Code, it takes a long time to get something approved through IBC, which is International Building Code. So the counties were telling us that it was going to take 3 to 5 years.
Mm.
So we ended up doing vertical hydroponic farms inside of the shipping containers. We looked at the industry. We looked at some of the competitors. We talked to people that were running the farms, found out what they liked, what they didn't like. And that's how we started the company. So we didn't know anything about it 2.5 years ago. We just kind of got into it. And since then, now we're starting to scale. So we have a root vegetable hydroponic farm. Vertical hydroponic farm, mostly for leafy greens. We have a mushroom farm, and we're going to be working on a root vegetable farm and fruit, and then eventually aquaponics for fish and shrimp.
Wow. And that can all be done inside the shipping containers?
Yeah. So one container is 320 square feet. It grows about the same acreage as about 3 acres worth of produce.
Wow.
And 365 days a year. So it doesn't matter where it is. You can deploy them anywhere in the world. You can stack them, so you can compartmentalize them inside of a warehouse. You could put them in a field. You can put them in a desert, Arctic environment. They're all insulated containers, so they run really well wherever you put them. We also have a solar company, so we're figuring out how to do solar. So we can eventually do this in areas where there's no infrastructure. We're talking to some other countries, mainly in Africa, and they have limited infrastructure. So we need to be able to do this off-grid.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what we're working on right now as well.
So currently your systems are connected to the grid. That's how it gets its power?
They're powered by the grid. Yeah, it's a 220 phase. Runs about 5 to 7 kilowatt hours.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a lot of energy usage, but mainly you're drawing energy from the air conditioning unit that's keeping it cool.
Right.
And the lights, it's a full spectrum LED that grows the plants.
Mm-hmm.
The mushroom farm doesn't have lights, so it's not running as much energy.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I have a lead engineer that's with our solar company. He's been in solar for about 32 years.
Mm-hmm.
So he's just a brilliant mind. So he's figuring out right now how to do it on the mushroom farm that's at our facility. And then eventually we'll figure out how to do it on the vertical hydroponic farm that draws more energy. It'll probably look like some sort of microgrid system, because the clients that we're going to be dealing with or that we are dealing with that want solar, they won't have 1 unit, they'll have 100 units in an area that's off grid to feed a large population.
Wow.
So we're figuring out right now. He's taking some data and doing some research and figuring out how we can do it and scale it. I think we'll have it figured out by the end of the year.
That's amazing, man. So
yeah.
part of the one of the goals you guys have is to be able to make it available for off-grid communities.
Yeah, I think that's a big. I think there's a lot of communities out there that would utilize the product for food security, but don't necessarily have the infrastructure to just plug it in.
Right.
Some of our clients, like hospitals and grocery stores, it's pretty easy to put a container right next to their store or their hospital. But in areas where you're talking about areas like in West Africa, there's no infrastructure. And, so to feed a population, you have to have something that can run off grid.
Yeah.
Also talking to a company that they have a product that reclaims moisture out of the air. And one of their products can run about 10 of our containers with the water that it produces.
Wow.
So it's basically drawing moisture out of the air, and then we're reclaiming that water. It goes through an RO system, and that's the water that we can use. The plants, it's a little bit different than traditional farming. So when you think of traditional farming, you think of a lot of labor, heavy equipment, a ton of water. This is a lot different. It's indoor agriculture, so the energy usage is far less. The water is a lot less. You're using about, in one container for a vertical hydroponic farm, it's about 2 gallons of water a day, which in comparison is probably 99% less than traditional farming.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the labor also is a lot less. So you usually, to run a farm, it requires 5 or 10 hours a week. And once you get it dialed in, you can even lower that number a little bit.
Right.
Most of the time, the amount of labor comes when you're harvesting the plants or when you're seeding the seedling tray area to grow the plants. So yeah, like 5 to 10 hours a week. You can have one person run multiple farms. It's not very hard to run. It's at the end of the day, it's just farming, but it's different than traditional farming.
One thing I noticed, when I was checking out your website, I looked at the virtual setup you have, where you can like walk through, essentially, kind of like Google Street View. And I noticed I've seen what looks to be like a Wi-Fi router. So I'm curious, like, are you able to make decisions or control them in any way remotely? Like, you don't even have to be there. You can kind of change some settings or something like that. Yeah,
it runs off of a system called Agrotech. They're a company that's been around for a long time. They're heavily involved with CBD and cannabis world.
Okay.
So it's an automated system. You can run it from your tablet. You can run it from your phone.
Right.
You can change the humidity, temperature, lighting schedule. You can do all that from that system.
Right on. Very cool.
Yeah.
Another thing you're saying about that you're really interested in working in getting some system set up in Africa. And you said that you think you're at the point now where you can set up a system that grows mushrooms with solar as its power source. But what's the issue when it comes to growing the plants? Is it just, it takes so much more because of the lighting? Like, are you able to just put solar panels on top of the shipping container and that should provide the mushrooms with enough energy, or?
Yeah. So when you talk about solar, you're going to need the panels and you're going to need an inverter and you're going to need a battery source.
Right.
So think of like powering a house with solar. You have the panels that are on top of the roof. You have the inverter that's usually next to the electrical box.
Right.
And then some solar systems have a battery storage where it's storing the power that it's not using while it's generating the power. So in our case, we would definitely want to have a battery storage because when the lights are on, the power usage is really high in the vertical farm. Right. And then when the lights are off, it goes way down.
Of course, yeah.
So we want something to be able to store that power when we're not using it. The mushroom farm, you have some equipment like a steam generator. So you're taking the substrate when you're first putting it in a bag to grow the mushrooms. The substrate is typically like a wood pellet. It goes into a steam generator or something that sterilizes that product. And then you do the inoculation in the lab area. Then it goes into an area where the mushrooms actually grow, a fruiting chamber. So the power usage is far less with the mushroom farm. So we're going to first set up solar on the mushroom farm. And then eventually this year, I think we'll have solar set up on the vertical hydroponic farm. So this year we're doing R&D on the mushroom farm. We're going to be building a root vegetable farm and then a fruit farm and then also an aquaponic farm.
Right on.
Hopefully by the end of this year, we'll have all that figured out and be able to run all that on solar if we need to.
Right on. And do you think, is putting panels just on the roof of the shipping container, should that provide enough solar power?
Yeah. For the mushroom farm, probably with the vertical hydroponic farm, we might need more solar. So it might be a system where it extends out, kind of like a layered system.
Okay, yeah.
Or you could also do a solar farm right next to, if you have a client that, some of our customers might want more than one. They may end up doing dozens or hundreds. So you could do a solar farm right next to it to power everything.
Very cool. Is there any limits to well, I guess there are, but I guess my question should be, what are the limits to what you can grow? Like what can be grown hydroponically? Like you said, you already got roots, mushrooms, and leafy greens. And you said you're talking about fruit systems as well. So would that be the fruits that grow like annually? Because obviously some fruit trees take like 10 years to fruit. So tell me more.
Yeah. Well, with vertical hydroponics, typically you're not growing anything from a tree just because it's really not, you're not able to do that unless you're in a warehouse, which doesn't make sense either way.
Right. Yeah.
So the stuff that we're growing in the vertical hydroponic farm would be a couple dozen types of lettuce, basil, herbs. You could do peppers, small peppers. You can do cherry tomatoes, strawberries, things like kale and spinach. So that would be the vertical hydroponic farm. When you get into a horizontal hydroponic system or aeroponic system, where it's either flooding a tray with water or it's misting water underneath, then you can get into stuff like, squash and zucchini and bigger root vegetables that you can grow traditionally farming.
Right.
And then fruit, anything that you can grow basically in the dirt that doesn't come from a tree, you can do inside, with vertical hydroponics or horizontal hydroponics or aeroponics system. So we won't be able to grow everything that you can get, from traditionally farming it in the ground, but pretty close to almost everything eventually.
So another like major fruit group that comes to mind would be like beans and legumes and stuff like that. Have you guys ever considered something like that?
We haven't done anything like that yet. Yeah, I think when the system that we're going to develop next will be an aeroponic or a horizontal hydroponic system.
Okay.
So, when you look at the system that we have now, there's the vertical walls.
Yeah.
That will be a system that's horizontal, and it'll be tables. So it will support the weight of root vegetables or fruit. Yeah, because you can't grow everything vertically. There's some things that you just can't do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I understand.
Yeah, when we first built the first container, we grew probably about 60 different things. Lots of different types of variety of lettuce, a bunch of different types of peppers. We did strawberries. We did a bunch of different herbs. Everything did really well. We did have an issue with spinach. It started pollinating. It flowered. Oh, okay. That's because we had about 12 other things growing in the container at the same time, and we didn't dial in the humidity and the temperature perfect for spinach. So that's another thing with the containers. You can grow lots of different things in the container at one time, and you can harvest at different cycles. So it really depends the end user what they need it for, what they want it for.
I see. Very cool. What was it I was going to ask? A friend of mine I was talking to last night, he's a farmer himself, so I asked him if he had any questions. And he was wondering if you have ways to provide different nutrient sources for like different walls, because different plants require different nutrients. So are you running the same level of nutrients through the entire water source, or like, can you separate it out?
So right now, the vertical hydroponic farm, the one that you see online, by the way, is a lot different than what we have now.
Okay.
So we're going to be redoing our website within the next 30 to 60 days. It'll show the new version and the mushroom farm, and then coming soon with the other stuff that we're working on.
Right on.
But what it looks like now is you have a tank that's in the rear that feeds water to all the walls, and then you have a tank that's in the front that feeds water to the seedling tray area.
Okay.
And that nutrients is the same. So we have talked about possibly doing something where we can feed different amount or different types of nutrients to each wall. And that's something that we could set up if we compartmentalized the tank and then did different pumps. We just haven't had the need for it.
Right.
No one specifically has asked us to do that. We use a plant-based nutrient. It's an organic plant-based nutrient. We went through about 12 different types of nutrient companies when we started. That was part of the first year, just going through the R&D and figuring out what worked, what didn't. We had issues with the nutrients crystallizing and clogging a lot of different things in the system.
Right.
So, yeah, it has been something that we've thought about. We just haven't done it yet.
Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you explain to me what aeroponics is?
Yeah, aeroponics would be typically, a horizontal system where there's water that's being misted from underneath.
Okay.
That would be an aeroponic system.
Is there a soil system or?
Yeah, there's typically with hydroponics and aeroponics, usually you're not really using soil. Typically you'd be using a seedling plug. So we have a couple different plugs that we use. One of our clients uses a plug from Jiffy plug. It's a organic plug that when it gets wet, it expands. And then the other plug that we use is a peat moss plug. So it's not really soil that you're finding in the ground. It's more of a certain type of material put together to not fall apart. And
so it's just something. It's just something for the seedling to grow in.
It's just something for the seedling to grow.
But the water, the mist, and the nutrients you provide, that gives everything the plant needs.
Yep. Yeah, it gives everything the plant needs. The same thing as if it was planted outside. There's a big debate about organic, indoor ag, and does it get the same amount of nutrients from the light that you use versus the sun? And there's been a lot of different studies on that. So you could argue that it doesn't, but I think that it gives the lighting system. We use a full spectrum LED light. It gives off the same spectrum of light as the sun. So in theory, it's the same nutrient,
right,
that it's growing in the ground. But then you're not worried about any sort of bugs or pesticides. You're not poisoning anything. So it's very clean. And when you're harvesting the plant, the root ball is it's in the plant. So when you go to the store and you get the live living lettuce with the root ball, that's how every plant that you harvest out of a hydroponic system or an aeroponic system is. So it's living for another 20 or 30 days if you store it correctly.
Okay.
So
very cool. So I'm curious about the cost as well. Like, what does it take? I assume you're buying old shipping containers and just modifying them yourself, right?
Yeah, when we started, we were doing old, used. They're called refrigerated high cube containers. So they're like 40 feet by 9.5 feet tall. And we've since changed to buy brand new containers. And we actually have a company that we're working with in the United States that actually they're building brand new containers for us. So everything's made in the U.S., including the steel, from start to finish.
So what kind, like, say if I wanted to get one container for myself, what kind of investment would I have to get it up and going?
The vertical hydroponic farms are $125,000. And then we have we have to get it there. So we have to ship it there.
Right.
The company what we really are is a logistics company.
Okay.
That's the heart of our company. It just happens to build these farms. So when we talk about doing stuff in other states or countries, it's easy for us to get things there, set it up, train people. So you have training, which we can do on site. Typically, most of our clients opt to have us come out and train them where their farm is going to be located. And then we have to get it there. So shipping costs, it's going to depend on where it's coming from. Typically set up, it uses a spigot like a hose, and then a 220 outlet. And you want to have typically a concrete footer on either side because the containers weigh about 12,000 pounds. So, some people put them in a parking lot. Others, they'll set up footers on either side if it's in a field or wherever it's located. Some of these go in buildings and warehouses. So, and you can stack them. So that would be the cost, is $125,000. Your return on investment typically is about 12 to 16 months if it's a vertical hydroponic farm. The mushroom farm is going to be a little bit different because the price is $185,000, but the turnaround time is usually quicker than that. Because if you're selling mushrooms, you can get $6 to $12 and sometimes more a pound.
Mm.
And the mushroom farm produces about 400 to 500 pounds of mushrooms a week.
Wow.
And it's gourmet mushrooms. It's not what you find at a grocery store. It's not the buttonhead mushrooms. So you're growing lion's mane, reishi, oyster, blue oyster, king oyster mushrooms, stuff that you really rarely see.
Yeah, right. So master healers.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Very cool, guys, man.
Yeah.
This is so interesting. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I actually have a list of questions. I rarely do this in my podcast because it's usually just like conversation form. But you guys, I just feel like you have so much information to share. So we talked about what you can and can't grow, and okay, how much can you? I think you might answer this, but I'll ask it again. How much can you produce? Like if we're talking, I suppose, like leafy greens from one container, and I guess how long does it take to go from seedling to ready to harvest?
Yeah, so seedlings are going to stay in this. You're going to plant in a seed plug, and that's going to stay in the seedling tray for about 7 to 14 days, and then you're going to implant those into the walls, into the tubes. So from seedling to harvest, or I guess I should say from seed to harvest, usually are about 60 days. Some are going to be less, some are going to be a little bit more, like 65. Some are going to be like 45 days. Then you have other plants that you're continually harvesting. Like if you're growing peppers, you're not planting it, growing it, and then harvesting it and planting another one. You're harvesting off of that plant. Or strawberries you can harvest for like 3 to 5 years off the same plant. So usually you're about 45 to 60 days. And if you look at the harvest, most of our clients will harvest a wall at a time. There's 3 walls that are in the container. We did one at a hospital a few weeks ago, and it was about 350, 400 pounds of lettuce. Wow. So yeah, it's an absurd amount of food.
Right on, man.
Yeah, it's a lot.
That's cool. Yeah. Have you ever had any issues with like algae buildup? Or like, is there a way to prevent like the light getting into the nutrients, water, and stuff like that?
Yeah, so we have a patented system that uses ozone and Venturi that aerates the water and aerates the water with the ozone. And there's we go through and do a system flush where it flushes that ozonated water through the system. So that was for about the first year. We had issues with algae, white powdery mildew, all different kinds of things, and we kind of figured out what worked best. And we did that with our products, and then talking to other indoor ag companies, people that were running farms similar to ours. We found out what they were doing that was working, what they liked, and that's how we built the product. So I think we've gotten to the point where we're on version like 15 now. So the one that you see on our website, that was the first product that we built. So I think we're at the point now where I think we've dialed everything in. It's working the way that we want, and now we can scale.
And like how long, when you do harvest everything, is that like just a day's work, a couple hours work? If you wanted to go harvest a full container, how long would it take you? Yeah,
well, Beau was with me the last time we harvested at a hospital outside of Denver. It was about 5 minutes to harvest the wall.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a couple of people. Usually you're like 5 or 10 minutes to harvest the whole wall. The stuff that takes time is usually when you're planting the seeds. But we actually have a product that makes it really quick to plant all the seeds. So you're not planting each seed in the seedling tray, because there's 10 trays in each row, and there's 220 seeds per tray. So we have a product that you can actually do that within like a few minutes. What takes time typically is just the maintenance and cleaning. But we built the farm to be as low maintenance as possible and as easy to use with the most yield.
Cool. Wow. So, in terms of like price, how much in comparison, like if you were to get a a big thing of like a big bag of like 3 hearts of romaine lettuce at the grocery store. I can't remember what I used to pay for that, but it's probably like anywhere from like $5 to $10. Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious, like, are you able with this type of system to make way better prices available for people?
Yeah. Your cost is about 11 cents per head of lettuce.
Wow.
And it can even be lower than that, depending on where you're growing it and, what your labor cost is,
mm-hmm.
How you're running it, because everybody's going to, even though we have standard SOPs and training manuals and videos, everyone's going to run it a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
So we have some of our farms that have been purchased by actual farmers
mm-hmm.
that have a farm, and they use this to supplement what they're already growing.
Okay.
So they will probably, their cost of operating is probably going to be less than, a hospital that we just trained. They have their staff, and there's 3 different people, and they're not doing it the same. So it just depends on the cost, the operational cost.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're like pennies.
Yeah,
pennies. I mean,
that's
it's
amazing.
literally, yeah. And the mushrooms, that's even better, because typically you don't find the type of mushrooms that you can grow in that container.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't done that cost yet, but we're working on it over the next three months. We'll be working on that.
With that being said, like, since your prices are going to be so good and so affordable, have you faced any like bureaucratic red tape, essentially trying to slow things down for you, trying to be like, because obviously you're going to be a competitor for some major farms and some major suppliers of food. So I'm just curious if you come up against anything.
Yeah, I think just looking at food security, I don't think there's just one. I think there's a lot of different things going on that can be a solution. So I don't think we're the only solution. Big agriculture probably won't like what we're doing.
Right.
But most of our clients right now are hospitals, grocery stores. We're doing some stuff with federal and local government and military.
Mm-hmm.
But our company's really in its infancy right now. So we're getting to the point right now where we can scale.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've done is we've started working with other manufacturers so that we can outsource our product within the United States, so we can start building 100 or 200 or 300 of these at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And that will give us the ability to scale. And I'm sure at some point we'll probably run into some organizations or, people within the industry of commercial farming that won't like what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully, like you said,
I think agriculture is changing. People are starting to understand that, where their food comes from is important.
Mm-hmm.
Starting to understand they can't be eating poison, because most of the food that is out there is straight poison.
Yeah.
And they want to know where their food comes from. They want to be able to have access to food.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we're trying to do, is give everybody the ability to have decentralized food security. So whether it's in an inner city or an area, in West Africa or anywhere around the world, that people have access to fresh, whole, super organic food.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, it needs to be done. And like you said, like the industry is changing, and many years ago you might have been shut down right away or had so many obstacles put in your way that you would have never been able to pull it off. But I think it seems a lot, not even just in necessarily what you're doing, but in many different areas, it seems big industries are adapting to what the demand is now, because more people are realizing that the food that they get from the grocery store is littered with all kinds of pesticides and all kinds of other poisons grown in terrible soil. And so they just understand that there needs to be a better option. So it's kind of like the industry is like adapting to that and saying, we'll take on these new practices. And you even said that you've worked with some pretty big farms as well. Like if they couldn't, they're the farmers that we have, for instance, we have a unit it's outside of Atlanta. Mm-hmm.
and it's a smaller family farm. So I wouldn't say industrial farm.
Okay.
But what I see happening in the future, I don't know what that looks like, but I see companies like Cisco, decentralizing their food security so that they can become the company that does super organic, gourmet mushrooms.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
If it's not Cisco, it's going to be somebody else.
Yeah.
So we're just giving these companies and local and federal governments and other places in the world the opportunity and the ability to do that themselves.
Right.
And also what we're doing is we're creating jobs. So we're bringing manufacturing back to the United States.
Right.
And we're creating jobs because somebody has to run these farms. Not necessarily extremely labor intensive, but somebody has to be trained. Somebody has to run it. The mushroom farms are a little bit more. There's a little bit more to them. It's not like planting a seed and putting it in a wall and harvesting it in 45 or 60 days. There's a process. So that's a little bit more time intensive.
Right.
But, it is job creation, so these can be deployed at homeless shelters, food banks. We're actually talking to a fairly large food bank company, and that would be able to create jobs within that local community. We have, for instance, we have a 501c3 set up on the south side of Chicago. We're talking about putting containers and having somebody run that along with some of the youth. So having these kids have a connection with where their food comes from, that's a big deal. And it's everywhere that you look. Like if you go on a military base, the only thing that you'll see is fast food.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so our soldiers need to be fed better.
Of course,
need to be fed better. And Beau and I were just talking earlier about retirement communities, and nursing homes.
Right.
This is a perfect opportunity for them because that needs to be something that we start figuring out. Or is our food security. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and another thing you said that was really interesting to me was that you said that you got some set up in hospitals as well, because not only should our soldiers be fed better, but it's often the case that people get hospital food that is often like cancer-causing food. So that is really good to know that your systems are being integrated into hospitals. Is that something that's being well accepted, or is it hard to get in there? Or
yeah, so the first hospital that we started working with, they actually reached out to us. Since then, we've been talking to some other hospital networks that are nationwide. So the hospital that we're working with right now, they have 17 hospitals in a couple different states.
Right.
And they're putting these at all their hospitals. And then they're going to set up a facility in Denver that's going to be a little bit of a larger facility where they might have 10 or 20 containers inside of a warehouse or on some of their property.
Okay.
And then that feeds other hospitals. So they were less concerned about the ROI and more concerned about, hey, we want to stop buying food from Cisco that is the same price as a restaurant in Denver. That's a 3 or 4 star restaurant,
right?
But we're getting really not good quality and it's expensive. And we want to start being able to have our own food security. So we want to be able to feed our patients and our staff and our visitors the best food possible.
Right.
And that's how they approached us. And since then we have an open PO. We're putting containers at all their hospitals, training all their staff to run it. So they haven't really done a PR release. I think our social media team is working with them now, and you'll see more stuff about the company within the next 60 to 90 days because we have some fairly large clients, but they have their own PR departments, and we have to redo our website to reflect where we're going. So, but yeah, it's. I mean, people are interested in it. They think it's cool. They want to know more about it. If a hospital's feeding their own patients and staff and visitors really super clean food, it's all positive.
And that's amazing. So much is going to change from this. It's going to have a big ripple effect for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And so I guess The only other thing I was wondering about in that area of thought is, was it hard to get approved by like the FDA?
So we haven't, we are actually in the process of going to get our own certification. We want to label the product that we build or the products that we build as super organic, because it's actually better than organic. If you look at organic standards, our product is better than organic.
Yeah.
But we have a legal department that's their job. They're going to be figuring that out over the next 6 to 12 months is my guess.
Right on.
Yeah.
So you're still, I'm not sure how it works in America. I'm in Canada, in case you didn't know.
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure if like you were even allowed to sell your own food on the scale that you are, unless you had the approval of the FDA.
Well, we are not the actual farmers. So what we're doing is we're building the product and then enabling the corporation or the individual or the company to grow their own food.
Right.
So with the hospital network, for instance, they don't necessarily need to be approved by the FDA because what they're doing is they're getting licensed and the permits and everything done so they can put this next to the hospital, then grow the food. And then there's certain SOPs and food safety practices that they follow to be able to actually put that food on a plate and give it to their patients or staff.
Right.
I'm sure as we get into other industries, there probably will be some certifications that we need to go through and do in order to do what we're doing, but we're just not there yet. But yeah, as far as the FDA, this is just a product to enable that corporation or company to grow their own.
Right. So they would have to have the licensing and the approval. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And SOP, is that standard of practice?
Standard operating procedures. Okay. So that would be, typically when somebody walks in a farm, they sign their name in and out and, they put gloves on or wash their hands and, things like that, especially with what's going on with COVID and the environment that we're in. It's really, we have to be super sensitive about all that. So that's what an SOP is. It's just how do you run the day-to-day operations of actually growing the food and putting it from the container to the plate.
Yeah. And you guys got all that set up in the container itself. You go in, there's a sink you wash your hands in.
There's a sink. Typically with most of our clients, so they actually have a kitchen or an area where they can take the food that they're growing and wash it the correct way before they package it or give it to their, in the hospital, it's just their patients and staff. In grocery stores, it's actually, they're harvesting it and then there's an area where they wash it, package it, and it's right there.
Wow.
So
perfect. You guys got a great setup.
Yeah.
So
there's one thing with the tubes that typically when every 3 to 6 months, you're actually cleaning the tubes that are growing the seedling, out of the lettuce comes out of it.
Right.
So you're going to take those tubes down and you're going to clean it. And most of our clients right now have industrial dishwashers. So they're just putting those right through the dishwasher.
That's convenient.
But we've talked about doing some sort of system inside the container that would actually clean it. So you don't have to go outside. So we're talking to, as an example, we're talking to Innu communities.
Okay.
In British Columbia, Canada, and Alaska. And, when it's winter for like 8 months and it's cold, you can't take stuff outside and wash it off. So those are some things that we're figuring out for some of these clients where it's a unique.
Right on. That's good to know because, just living in Canada, I hear all the time about the food security, especially up north, is terrible.
We actually have a client that's in, I think he's in Nova Scotia, and he has a couple farms, and he, his farms that he runs are a huge, revenue stream for him. The community knows about it because he's the only one that's doing it in the wintertime. Right. And, the logistics of getting stuff to these communities. I mean, when you're talking about Alaska, there's areas in Alaska where you can't, get there unless you're flying.
Right.
And half of the year it's winter, and, more than half of the year, or it's dark for 6 months. So, there's a huge need for this, not only in inner cities, in food deserts like the United States, but there's a huge need for this in other parts of the world where food is a big issue. Water is also a big issue. Yeah. So the fact that we can grow, acres upon acres of food with a couple gallons a day of water, and very little labor, that's a big deal. We're talking about communities that, water, as an example, one of our sales team members is from Israel, and water is a big issue in Israel. And one of our sales team members is from Cyprus. Water is a big issue in Cyprus. So traditional farming is not ever going to go away. And big agriculture is not ever going to go away. But with the population increasing and water becoming scarce, land is becoming scarce.
Right.
This is just one of the solutions. There's many, many solutions.
Right. Yeah.
This is just one that can fit a lot of different problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So, what was the other thing I was going to say? Well, I just like the idea in general of talking about all the different solutions there are, because clearly the way we've been running our food systems has not been beneficial for everyone, because there's obviously a lot of people don't have access. Oh yes, the water. You said that there's a tank on the front and on the back. So do you fill those yourself, or are you hooked up to a local water source?
Yeah, usually they're just hooked up to a local water source. If you have access to a local water source, then it just remains hooked up to it.
Right.
But in areas where it gets really cold, typically you'll have a tank that's in the ground, or you fill up the tank every, so often. But the tank in the rear is about 172 gallons, and the tank in the front is like 45 gallons. So you're not usually filling the tanks up very often. The front tank is the seedling tray area, and that's where you're flooding the trays that are growing the seeds in the seedling trays. So that's like once a day. It doesn't use a lot of water.
Right.
The rear tank is where it's going into the walls and dripping down through the tubes and recirculating. So that, whole system is using a couple gallons a day.
Have you ever...
Go ahead.
Have you ever had the necessity to actually purify the water or clean it in any way? Because just speaking from my personal situation, I don't live there anymore, but the town I grew up in has a really there's two separate parts of town, and one part of town is off this spring gulch, and they got really good water. But where I grew up in the valley, the water is terrible. Like sometimes you run a bath and it's almost pure brown. So I'm just curious, if you're hooking up to a local water source all the time, is there ever a time where you're like, this water isn't sufficient, we need to clean it before we use it?
Yeah, we have a pretty robust RO system that filters the water through the seedling tray area and the rear tank. So there's two RO systems, and then there's some other things that we patented that clean the water as it's being filtered through and going through the system. So we haven't had any issues yet, but I'm sure when we start doing stuff in mainly, maybe even within the U.S., but other places of the world, I'm sure we'll have to figure out how do we clean the water so it's good enough before it actually goes into our RO system. Right. But right now we haven't had to deal with anything.
Right.
There's been no issues with it.
Yeah, that might be an issue more when you're way up north in Canada, because apparently there's a lot of water issues up there as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for a lot of communities, they'll get their water shipped in. Like a truck will actually drive full of water from another community because their local water source is terrible.
Yeah. Well, that's happening in California and some other areas in the US where they don't actually have water.
Yeah, exactly.
But they're getting all the water shipped in because all the water's gone.
That's insane, man.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow. So, Beau, right?
That's correct, sir.
So what is your role in all this?
So I come in from a heavy medical entrepreneur background.
Okay.
And I'm here to personalize the food that the individuals are eating.
Oh.
So I own a genetic laboratory, and we're also very heavy in the COVID. We've come out with the nation's first saliva-only mass spectrometer COVID testing.
Okay.
So we're able to provide the most accuracy and the highest throughput, while at the same time looking at a patient's mental health genetics and also looking at the best food sources so that they can get the best nutrients that their body will metabolize. There's a big difference between ethnicities and the food sources that you need to eat compared to a different ethnicity. Right. So really tailoring this in so that we can help boost our immune systems, get the most nutrients, and with the flex that's going on in the agriculture industry, with grocery prices skyrocketing, food sources becoming more scarce, now is more the time than ever to find out what your body really needs to eat so you can metabolize it well, so you can be healthy, and your immune system is in optimal condition to fight COVID or not get COVID, and also just to be the best you can be from a health standpoint.
Amazing, man. That's so cool. Yeah. So, so you say you got a different type of testing, so you don't have to stab that thing down your nose anymore?
Yeah, no more poking the brain.
That's good to know. It's good to know.
I'm very proud of what my team's been able to do. We went to the #1 respiratory hospital in the nation, and we validated our science with them. And we did it with nasal swabs and also saliva. And then we started seeing that there was an issue not only just in the saliva as well, because what we had was a spit tube collection, and we need to get 2 mLs of spit, which is quite a bit. And also a lot of people don't like just sitting around, for multiple minutes, some people up to 10 minutes just because they don't produce enough saliva, spitting in these tubes. And then there's also an issue for our seniors that don't create a lot of saliva.
Right.
So we said, all right, we got to figure this out. So we went and we trademarked and have our own proprietary offering where you put a foam sponge underneath your tongue. You keep it there for 2 minutes, up to 5 minutes if you have salivatory issues. And then you just put it back in the tube and send it back. And the coolest part about this is you don't need a medical professional to stab your brain. So you now can do this at your own house, or you can do this at a physician's office, and it doesn't have the same PPE requirements. So we drastically cut down the amount of PPE needed as well.
Wow. That's amazing, man. And is it any different in terms of accuracy?
Very big difference.
Really?
So what you're seeing out with in the market right now, like if you look at the White House, they're using a PCR method for testing that can have anywhere between a 30 to 40% error rate.
Right.
And right now with ours on a mass spectrometer, which is a very sensitive testing, it's called MS PCR. And we right now have a 12% error rate, and we think that's going to go down with more population that we test.
Oh, okay. So what's the MS stand for?
Mass spectrometry.
Oh, right. Okay. I see. Yeah. Because I don't know for sure. I'm not very educated on the subject, but a little bit of research I have done, I just heard that the PCR test is not reliable. Essentially, it has a lot of false positives. It's even triggered by something in our body that is secreted when we have any type of toxicity. And again, I don't know if this is accurate or if it's just, but apparently when our cells have any sort of toxicity, our cells secrete these things called exosomes, and they are very similar in molecular makeup to the virus itself. So you could be detecting exosomes with the PCR test, and it makes it look like you have the virus, when in reality, it's just that your cells are toxic for some other reason. Have you heard about this? Do you know anything about this?
Yeah, I mean, that's what my career is about. So, you're tracking very, very well. And that's also why we wanted to do the saliva, because that opens up additional testing that we can provide. So we're speaking with numerous nursing homes right now, and we're talking about doing personalized food for their community, but also based upon their health conditions, and also where they might be from a cortisol perspective or from a cytokine perspective, so that we can make the best food for that community that's happening at that current time with their cortisol levels and also with their inflammation scales. And the reason why we're bringing cortisol is because cortisol is the stress hormone. And prolonged stress drastically increase the ability to have depression.
Right.
So if we have these people who have been isolated, they can't see their families, this is the time where their cortisol levels are probably pretty high.
Yeah.
So let's give them the most nutrient-dense food we can get. Let's try and curb this as quick as possible with food. You come from, I have over a decade just in mental health entrepreneurship, promoting pharmacies, hospitals to laboratories. And there's only two things that I've ever seen that have really helped with that mental health perspective. And it's not pharmaceuticals. It is exercising, activities, and eating healthy.
Couldn't agree more, man.
It's very cheap. It's very cheap.
Yeah.
And we can do this. And now that we found a source that can provide the food in a cost-effective means and a mass production means, you're now going to start seeing these shipping containers, hopefully at a lot of nursing homes. And also for us to start doing this direct to consumer based upon how the patient's responding to stress, how their body's responding to inflammation, so that we can curb hypertension, we can curb diabetes, we can curb rheumatoid arthritis. The number one killer in this nation's inflammation, and mushrooms are great anti-inflammatories. So there's a lot of stuff that we're doing here that are trying to be parallel and solve lots of issues. Solve the COVID, let's defeat COVID. Let's defeat mental health, and let's get good, healthy initiatives and good, healthy food on the table for all of our seniors and for all of our communities to be able to thrive and put this behind us and at least curb these issues while everybody else is fighting the other political issues and the other issues that they may be facing.
Right. Yeah. And like we were saying earlier with Jake, it's going to have a major ripple effect. You start changing the mental health of the country, then everything else changes as well.
Yeah,
politics runs more smoothly. Everything changes when everybody's in a better state of mind.
Yeah, when people are happy. Yeah, there's a big difference there. So that's what we want to do. It's not, yes, we have a lot of problems to solve. We're trying to do this in an inspiring way.
Yeah.
People can do this. We can own this. We can, we can educate, and we can take this down and do this from an individualized, personalized perspective, and also from a global perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm curious about some of the ways in which people differ in their nutrient requirements, because the only thing, I 100% understand that that's a thing, but I'm just wondering if you have any examples, because the only example that comes to my mind is that I heard a couple of years ago that 75% of the world is lactose intolerant, and the majority of those people who are lactose intolerant are non-white people, usually Asians, Black people, I think maybe people from the Middle East as well. They're more inclined to be lactose intolerant. And I think that might be because, Eastern Europeans, white people in general, have been drinking milk more consistently. So they retain this enzyme in their stomach. I think it's called lactase. We all have it when we're babies, so we can digest our mother's milk. But then we usually lose that enzyme at 2 or 3 years old. But if a population continues to drink cow's milk, goat's milk, or whatever, it encourages the body to continue producing lactase. And since that's more prevalent in white cultures, they are more able to digest milk properly, whereas people of color often become lactose intolerant because it wasn't as consistent in their culture. So that's just one example I know of. Well, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that as well, but I'm just also curious of other ways in which people of different backgrounds require different nutrients.
Okay, so great question, but the real answer is it's absolutely crucial when it comes to ethnicity. How a Caucasian metabolizes food, how an Asian metabolizes food, how an African American metabolizes food are drastically different. Everything from vitamin D to L-methylfolate to MTHFR. MTHFR would probably be my number one gene that I would associate with the ability from ethnicities to be able to metabolize and also get out the toxins in their body.
Okay.
If you have an MTHFR deficiency, your body will hold on to toxins. It will not get out. It will not rid them. It will clog up the gut. That's where the gut health and digestive health really starts to get into be a very big focus and a very big issue. And with the genetic testing, we can look at that. We can see if this patient has that deficiency and address it with simple supplementation. And again, not expensive, and it could even be broccoli. I mean, we could be looking at very different diets and being able to do this from a very cost-effective perspective. So you don't need to go to the GNCs of the world. You don't need to go into these, big supplement companies that want to, sell you $200 worth of products. Again, if we can tailor this in from a food perspective, we can do this in a very cost-effective manner.
Right. Would you agree with the statement that we can get all of our essential nutrients from food itself? Like supplements aren't necessarily necessary?
That's such a big debate. For the common person, no doubt. Now, if we're looking at somebody who, wants to get on the stage and be Mr. Olympia, could they? Yes. Would they? Probably not, because there's just other ways, with the biohacking community and everything of that sort. It's a very big debate. Right. But what I personally believe, and this is just my personal belief, is yes, you don't need the supplements, you need the food, and you need to eat correct.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense, because I guess what I was mostly curious about is like the average human could live optimally with just, the food from the earth kind of thing. But I'm sure there are instances, like you said, where people might have a genetic deficiency where they might need to eat more of one nutrient. But in order to get that from food, they might need to eat 5 pounds of kale a day or something. So rather than eating the 5 pounds of kale, they would just take a supplement or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great example. Yes, I would definitely agree with that statement.
And speaking from just my personal diet, I suppose, I'm curious what your thoughts are on having no animal products in your diet, because I haven't eaten any animal products in years. And for me, it was a health decision. At first, I read a book. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, is by a guy named Dr. Joel Fuhrman. And he wrote a book called Eat to Live. And essentially, it was all about how you can obtain all your essential nutrients that the body needs solely from plants. So I'm just curious what your opinion is on that. Another big debate for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge debate.
Yeah.
I personally do like my red meat. I do like having my chicken and everything of that sort. I do find that there are nutrients out there that they provide that are essential as well. But where I do totally agree in regards to this debate is as Americans, and I don't know how the diet is in Canada, but as Americans, we eat too much of the red meat. We eat too much of the chicken, and I think that a very good balanced diet, and going back to the old food pyramid, might not be a bad idea.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's basically what I was curious about. It's just I was just wondering, not even that, to each their own, eat what you want. But I was just wondering if you believe that it is healthy or you could live optimally with just plants.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're starting to throw in the mushroom complexes and you're starting to throw in the leafy greens and everything of that sort, I don't think there's a doubt. I really don't. Obviously, there's going to be a debate for everything I say. But I think that, if you're starting to bring in your cordyceps, your reishi, your lion's mane, you're getting some of those good hardy benefits from those, and then you're throwing in your kale, your lettuce, your tomatoes, your peppers, everything of that sort. There's no doubt that you could live a healthy lifestyle. I don't think anyone can sit here and say, "Oh, that's unhealthy." Right.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Because the argument that I've often heard is that the only nutrient that you don't get readily from plants is vitamin B12. And you typically get that from animal products because, but the misconception is that vitamin B12 comes from animals, but in reality, it comes from the soil. Vitamin B12 is made by a bacteria that blankets the whole earth. So if you're eating your romaine lettuce from your own garden, then you're going to get your vitamin B12 because you're getting a little bit of that dirt, you know what I mean? Because that's how you get it. But whereas our food now is so sterilized, we pick the romaine lettuce and then we get rid of every single bit of dirt on there so that vitamin doesn't remain. So that's why.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, yeah. So I was just wondering, if there's anything else you thought of that was of an essential nutrient that you couldn't get from plants. But because, I've had this conversation many times over the last few years, making that decision myself. But vitamin B12 seems to be the only thing that may not be readily available. But again, if you are, eating from your own garden, you're going to get it. But if you eat from only the grocery store, then it's smart to take a vitamin B12 supplement, because most people would get it because the animals are eating from the dirt. So then you get it because they have it in their bodies. But then even in factory farming, a lot of them aren't eating from the dirt. They're eating from grain that we feed to them. So even the livestock is injected with B12 because they're not getting their B12 like they normally should. So then people end up getting their B12 from what was injected into a cow and then goes into its body, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, right?
Yeah. So, man. So that's really cool that you say that.
Well, sorry for interrupting you.
No, go ahead, man.
That's the reason why I brought up the MTHFR.
Right.
So MTHFR is how your body can produce and also be able to take in the B12.
Oh, I see.
It's a very significant pathway.
Right. Okay. I've never heard of that one before. What is it? Do you know what it stands for? MTFHR?
Yeah, methyl. I'm not even going to try. I'm not even going to
chemical
try.
name.
I'll botch it.
Yeah. Fair enough. That's cool, man. So yeah, man, you guys, you're giving me great hope. I love connecting with people like you because it just shows me that there are other ways of doing things that are far more smart than what we're doing right now. We can actually take care of this world in a lot better way. And I guess that just kind of leads me to a question. I often say, and I'm a firm believer, that we have the capacity and the knowledge and the technology and the resources to feed everybody on this planet. But the way our system is set up is kind of making it more limited. And I'd just love to get your thoughts on that. Would you agree with that statement? Do you think we can feed 7.5 billion people if we change the way? Yeah.
No doubt. Innovation.
Yeah.
Yeah. The standard ways that that's maybe one of the good things that's happened from this pandemic is it's actually exposed a lot of our weaknesses. And I would imagine that, if we don't make some serious innovations and some serious changes, we're all going to be in some pretty unfavorable situations.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that we're going to be seeing a lot more of these vertical farms. We're going to be seeing a lot more innovation in other industries as well. I look at this vertical farm and the hydroponics and how they're able to do the mushrooms in these shipping containers as, possible pivots to the Green New Deal, and doing it in a way that is actually feasible and that can be done and actually executed in a rather quick manner.
Right. So the Green New Deal, that's a proposal it's still not decided whether or not they're doing that yet. I guess that will come out within the presidential election if they want to actually go ahead with that, or?
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. Who knows what's going on there? But yeah. I just remember hearing about it a little bit.
Probably like you do in Canada. We have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, not many do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What's clear to me is that we got to take the power into our own hands, man, because depending on our leaders to feed everyone and clothe everyone and shelter everyone has obviously not turned out the way it should. And we're not in many ways living a healthy lifestyle. Like even you said, I love what you talk about, how the key to mental health is, exercise, nutrition, all that. Now from my point of view, there might be points in time where perhaps you have such a severe mental illness that pharmaceuticals might be necessary, but pharmaceuticals should be like a temporary thing to get you moving towards a healthier lifestyle. But if you've lived your whole life with like schizophrenia or something like that, it might be difficult for you to just change the way you eat and start exercising, and then your mind is fixed,
Well, yeah, and again, another excellent point. So in this, the genetic testing that I do is called pharmacogenetic testing.
Okay.
So we're looking at how the body metabolizes not just food, but we also in these reports provide the 200 top prescribed medications and how your body would metabolize. And during the assessment, if patients would like to understand how the body's currently metabolizing what prescriptions they are taking on a daily basis, we could do that as well. And I can tell you from, this is my 4th laboratory now. There is a lot of prescriptions people are taking on a daily basis that their body does not metabolize.
Right.
And they're spending a lot of unneeded copays and deductibles towards them. So not only can this genetic test tell you how to, best fight maybe mental health, also teach you their best lifestyles, but also be almost like a financial planning tool of, hey, I can take this medication, I can't take this medication, I don't need to be taking this. And maybe if I take these foods, I can get off this medication. So then again, being cost effective and being fiscally responsible and how we go about this approach and how we tailor the diets and why this is so beneficial.
So if I'm understanding this right, you can, by using the genetic testing, you can determine whether or not a medication would actually work for someone.
That is the sole purpose of pharmacogenetics.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, because usually it's just trial and error. A doctor says, oh, you've got depression, try this one. And they'll go and take it for 2 months. It might be being metabolized, but they might not notice the effects. They might, their depression might be too strong or something like that, or it's not a good one for them, so it doesn't work for them. But you can actually see their genetics and say, this one will work for you and this one won't.
Yeah, again, we're going to have to rethink about this whole thing called healthcare.
Yeah.
And the whole trial and error makes absolutely no sense to me.
Yeah, exactly. There's better ways to find out. Yeah, that's incredible. Wow. Okay. I guess I've asked pretty much everything I have to ask. Before I guess I only have really one real question that I just like to discuss in general. But before I do, I was just wondering if there's anything you guys want to share that we haven't talked about so far that you think is pertinent, or you like any information that you would like to share with anybody who might be listening.
Yeah, so we're trying to create a new industry. We're trying to get personal trainers to get really involved. We think it's wellness is essential, and what we mean by that is we're going to need to get personal trainers, dietitians, and not only are they very valuable, but also getting them in with these communities and having intimate relationships with their clients. And we are putting together some proposals with some associations together so that we can get people to get into the activities, have someone help monitor them, help educate them on the best foods, so that we can do this on a very proactive level and also on an intimate level. And we have some pretty good lucrative streams for individuals who want to jump into these fields, and specifically into our senior market, because that seems to be the highest prevalence of the diabetes, hypertension, and also the ones that are most often overseen in regards to physical activity. So in that sense, we're looking for people who are very specific within the senior market to be able to help us fulfill and create these new industries and new income revenue streams for people who maybe have been out of work.
Right. Very cool. How about you, Jake? Anything to add?
Well, yeah, you asked a question earlier about, can we do this, on a large scale? I think it's going to take a lot of innovation and a lot of forward thinking to rethink, food security. But I think we can do it. It's going to take some time.
Yeah.
But the idea is to make, these communities self-reliant,
right,
and have hyper local food security and decentralized food security. And that's what we're trying to do. So we're trying to scale to actually be able to do that. We're getting closer every day.
Right.
So yeah, we're excited.
Oh man, me too. That's incredible, dude. I love, like I said earlier, I love meeting with people that are truly have innovative ideas to make the world more better for everyone, man. It's really a pleasure.
Yeah.
One other thing that popped in my head, Beau, I was wondering if, it's another subject I've heard off and on over the past couple of years, never really delved deeply into it, but, and that's the importance of the gut biome. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that in general. One of the things that you guys talk about is since you have this company and this way of producing food, there's no pesticides. And so there's very few random chemicals that end up in your body and end up messing up with your gut biome. And I recently discovered a doctor who often talks about the importance of gut biome. And he talked about how we basically have to purge our gut biome of the buildup of glyphosate that has been building up over the years of eating commercial plants and stuff like that. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, no doubt. The gut is your second brain. And, you can be in a really strong mindset and be as mindful as you want. But if you're eating cheeseburgers all day, you're never going to be able to get to and achieve the levels that you want to achieve. Hence, again, MTHFR. Right. I really would encourage you to look into the benefits of understanding your MTHFR. Okay. And understanding if you have MTHFR impairments and the effects that can have on your body, especially even from an aging perspective. So, that is one of the biggest things in regards to ridding the toxins that are in your body.
Right. Okay. So I'm curious, it is like you say, you use the genetic makeup of people to determine what's good for them and what works for them in particular, but is there any generalization? Like, would you be able to recommend to me as a Caucasian male something that I should be eating or shouldn't be eating?
That is such a complex question there's no simple answer to that.
Yeah, you'd need my genetic makeup.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking to somebody who just goes in rabbit holes all the time with science and, sometimes comes out ahead.
Right. Gotcha. Cool. Right on. Well, just to end it off, I'm just curious, like I always talk about this with pretty much all my guests. You guys are clearly innovators and you want to change the world in a more positive way. So I'm just curious, like what your vision is. Like, obviously you have this idea for growing your business, but where do you see us in the distant future? Can you see us creating a world where everybody's actually taken care of, everybody's actually fed? Do you think we can get to the point where everybody has their basic needs met, and then not even necessarily in a societal change type of change from capitalism to communism, but like from my point of view, I think it's necessary to abolish all isms, and just think of it more simply. Like, is everybody got food on their table? Does everybody have shelter? Does everybody have energy? Does everybody have clothes on their back? And then we can talk about everything afterwards on how we should run things. But the main goal to me should be to give everybody in the world their basic needs. So I'm curious if you guys have had profound visions yourself about where you see the world going.
I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I mean, most of the partners in this company have other businesses. We've had success in other companies, and I think, you get to a point in your life where it's like, it's just a little bit more about, doing something good than making money. So I think we can get a better connection, when we start with younger generations, understanding where their food comes from, and it's important to have that connection with food. Right. I think if we can start there, then we can make big changes. I see this company scaling very quickly over the next 3 to 5 years. We have some people in some high places, so amazing. We're going to be able to do some stuff, hopefully on a federal level, not only in the United States but some other countries. And if we can do that, then we can make the change that we would like to make. Awesome. So it's going to take a lot of work, but yeah,
it'll be worth it.
We're making progress every day. So yeah.
Awesome. That's good to hear.
So that is a deep question.
That's what I do, man. I love the deep questions. We go deep on my podcast.
All right. The answer to your question is, I think in the most basic terms, self-management. I don't think we can sit here and point fingers at the federal government or any of our governments or any of our politicians. Right. We've got to take control ourselves. So innovators and entrepreneurs such as ourselves, of course, that's where we want to be. And of course, that's where we want to see these things. And of course, that's why we do what we do, because we want to see that. Right. But there's also, other sides that fight that. And there's other sides that don't necessarily line up with those same key attributes. So if we were to be able to have a society that self-regulated themselves, did what's good for best and best for all, there's no doubt we could get there, but it would take a completely different mind shift from a lot of our individuals that, share the same space as us.
Agreed. Yeah, 100%. I think I'll often say that it starts with the individual, because if you want to change the world, you got to change yourself. You got to be a shining light for what you want the world to be, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a taker and you just think everybody's going to be doing something for you and you're not willing to provide back, I do believe in karma, and maybe there's a reason why you're in the situation you're in.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Wow. Cool. So with that, I guess, man, we'll bring it to a close. So I'm curious. Well, I'm just curious. Can people invest in you? Is there a way to contribute to your company?
I'll let you go again, Jake.
Well, we are self-funded right now, so we are going to bring on possibly a strategic partner. But for funding, we would certainly entertain a conversation, but a partner that we're going to be bringing on most likely is going to help us with strategy, with outsourcing, manufacturing, logistics.
Right.
And really the heart of our company is we're a logistics company.
Right.
That also fabricates these farms that you can deploy anywhere. So we certainly entertain that. Right now we don't really need capital.
Right on. That's good to hear.
I think we're going to be at the point soon where a capital raise, like a venture capital raise, may not be needed. But we have had offers. We're trying to find the right strategic partner. So
that's excellent.
We can certainly talk about it if anyone's interested. Sure.
Yeah. So you mentioned that before, that you're primarily a logistics company, but you make these farms. So what else does your company do aside from these farms?
So Rusty Walker's our CEO. We brought him on about 1.5 years into the company. He has a logistics company called Absolute Logistics. He does rail cars, everything from small to large logistics on a global scale.
Okay.
So what I mean by a logistics company is we have the ability to scale this rather than having roadblocks. We can get stuff figured out, how to ship stuff to Africa, set up 100 of these in, a different country.
Right.
Whereas other companies may not understand the logistics side.
Right.
So, we would certainly entertain the right partnership, but we're not really looking for money. We would rather have a strategic partner that can help us.
Right.
That we may be lacking because we're not perfect.
Right.
We've tried to bring on the right partners in different areas, but we're certainly not perfect. So.
Right. And you guys have been only at this for 3 years? Is it?
Yeah, it'll be 3 years in October this year.
Cool! Wow. So you're doing pretty well.
We spent about the first 1.5 years building our first farm.
Right.
And doing the R&D and testing it and growing stuff. And we spent the last year, doing the mushroom farm, and now figuring out how we're going to be able to build, 100 of these at a time. So that's what we've been working on. And now we're at the point where we're ready to scale. So,
very cool. Excellent.
Yeah, we wanted to do it the right way.
That's great to hear.
Yeah. With that being said, we definitely need a strategic partner. Are you familiar with some of the food initiatives that are going on in Japan?
I'm not sure. No.
Okay. So Nestle and Japan as a country have teamed together to do genetic testing and personalized supplementation for for their citizens.
Okay.
So they're getting them further ahead of this because they do realize that there is the food shortages, there is the inequality in food,
right? And
everybody's bodies do require different supplementation, different diets. So they have been investing heavily. They've put $1 billion invested into it and have raised $1 billion for this initiative. Right. So we're looking for the right visionaries, the right strategic partner. And again, it comes down to the company that really wants to do good. I haven't asked for you now.
Let's hear it.
Do you have any connections to Kimball Musk?
Kimball Musk? Is that related to Elon?
Elon Musk's brother.
No, never even knew he existed.
Yeah, Kimball Musk actually helped Elon make PayPal.
Okay.
And he's gone and he has his own restaurants, but he has his own shipping containers that he produces his food in at those restaurants. So he'd be somebody who would be a strategic partner that we're looking to connect with and teach, because he's already understands about 50% of the business already. Right. So he's somebody that could be a quick learner and also most likely has the ability to get the funds to take us to that level, right? And SpaceX or Tesla, what we're doing.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. Oh, dude, that's exciting. Well, if I ever come across them, if we ever cross paths, I'll send them your way, man.
Well, hopefully there's a listener on here who does know them.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. All right, cool. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say before we go. I guess that pretty much covers it. You guys, that was amazing. All the information was very helpful. I understand a little bit more about how it all works. And I'm excited for you guys to keep growing.
Thank you.
There's definitely a double entendre there. Grow your business and grow your food.
Hey, man. Well, hey, thanks for just even allowing us to come on your show. Thanks for us telling you a little bit about what our vision is. Mm-hmm. And we're looking forward to seeing where this goes.
Yeah, man. So where can, just for anybody who's listening wants to learn more about you, I know you got an Instagram account. You got a website as well. So if you just want to tell me what all those links are, where could people learn more about you in general?
Okay, so from the genetic testing and the personalized medicine perspective, it's Vertizome, and that's VERDOSOME.
Okay.
And how we came up with the name is we're a green genetics company for food and food sources. Mm-hmm. So Verde, green, chromosome genetics, that's how we came together with Vertizome.
Gotcha.
And then for Jake, it's farmboxfoods.com and also on Instagram, Farmbox Foods.
Right on. Cool. That pretty much covers it.
All right, sir. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. It's been my pleasure. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all this wonderful information.
Thank you, sir.
Awesome. So good luck with everything you do, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Take care.
Peace.